businesses in the state of Oregon that operate in the cannabis industry as far as security goes, because you do have cameras that's covering your facility of a minimum resolution and an alarm system that's monitored. So you've checked those boxes at least. There will be a day and a time where that minimum requirement is less significant and everybody has it, and so you have to go a little bit more to not be the easiest target on the block. And so at the end of the day, not being the easiest target on the block, there's unfortunately a lot of really easy, it's sad, and we get the calls after they're tired of getting robbed again and again, of people that put a system in, and it's mind-boggling. Like, you don't have an alarm system, you don't have any cameras, you have nothing, and your building is full of cannabis, and this is where you store your cash. And but it's an industry that's been in the dark for the most part, and so there's people coming into the light. But I can't fathom that, but it is what it is. And so putting in having an alarm system, having some cameras in there is an amazing deterrent. And letting people know, if you have invested in a system that is a little bit more robust, that is not the minimum, I'm sure you've all seen some pretty terrible cameras, and the quality, the old convenience store cameras on them. Hey, if you see this blurry man, somewhere with a hooded sweatshirt and a baseball cap on, please let us know. So there's a lot of versions of terrible cameras, but if you have invested in a nice system, you want people to know about it. Sometimes people say, I want my cameras hidden, I don't want people to see them. Like, you are crazy. That is the exact opposite. Just put them out there and make them bright and right in their face, and show them a monitor of their face, looking at the face on the monitor, and they're like, that's me, and I can see myself. And the chances of something happening at that facility drastically reduce. And we are a big proponent of not only having the security, but letting people know about it, not only people that work for you or subcontractors that come in, customers, making it very in their face that you have a system installed, in their face that you get real-time text message alerts of non-emergency events. So even when the system is disarmed, or that the system was disarmed at 2 o'clock in the morning, I want to know about it. So yes, you may have the right code, you maybe have the key to the front door because your roommate is the manager of the facility and he's passed out, but I know about it and I have access to the video cameras, and it's not something that I'm gonna wait 8 hours before I find out after you've taken my DVR, full of all the video of you taking the DVR, and ending up with nothing. And so you put these different measures in place, and you let people know about them, and we have, knock on wood, I think it's wood, it's plastic, but we'll pretend it's wood. We go above and beyond. Our tagline, as you can see, is beyond compliance, and so there's a minimum level that you need to get open, and we understand when people need to just get that minimum to get open. And then there's another layer that is actual true protection. That when you are open, you are licensed, and you now have a facility full of cannabis, cash, employees, and no guns, you want to be able to sleep at night. So I'm not going to harp on the whole security thing. I think it's pretty straightforward. There are measures that can be put into place above the minimum that are not expensive. They're easy to do and highly effective. One of the things is I'm a big proponent of the alarm system that has real-time alerts of non-emergency events and emergency events. Text messages get sent out instantly to 10 people all at once if you need to. So if something is happening, whether it's just the system was disarmed outside of the hour, a door was opened outside of normal protocol, you're all here at this event. And so if you had a facility and you're the only person with the code and you get a text message that your alarm was just disarmed and somebody's opening up the door and accessing your safe room, you might want to do something about it. Otherwise, there's no alarm going off. It's not something the police are going out to because they have the code, or they looked over your shoulder once and saw that. And so that's a very easy piece. We have product tracking and cash tracking. It literally looks like product. You put it in a bag of product. It's fantastic. We have them at trade shows. David's probably seen some. You literally have this jar and you're like, it's only this big, and you can't find the actual tracker inside of it unless you reach your hand in there and grab it. So, and cash tracking, it looks like a stack of cash. You put it in your safe. So if someone does come in, you hand it to them. You say, make sure you take this one too. And you have an app and you track them down and you send it to the police. The police have access to the tracking. It's not often always when you're not there. It's also when you are there, and that's probably when you're most worried about it, honestly, because those are the stupid people that have a gun and are in front of you, as opposed to the smart criminals, the sophisticated criminals that you don't have to worry about. They're going to take all your product, but they don't want to interact with a human being and have that kind of a threat. So we have solutions for both of them that are just in my opinion, common sense for a cannabis business that's up and operating, even if you have to take a little bit to get some capital coming in, because that's always a factor. And then there's the other safety side of it that we'll talk about, which is the OSHA compliance, I have a successful business, and somebody wants to take advantage of that. You have to have cameras around your facility everywhere anyway, so why not prove if they're faking their OSHA claim? I slipped and fell and cracked my head open. It looked like you poured water out and then just jumped on your head and cracked your head open, and that's why the lawsuit is. And so when we put a system in, we design it, we have conversations with people that there's a minimum level, and then for a very small amount more, you can go above that. And with cameras, for instance, it's kind of like an iPhone, use an example, or smartphone. You buy a 16 gigabyte iPhone, I don't know if you can buy those anymore. And for $100 more, you get a 64. So it's 4 times the memory for an extra $100 as opposed to buying 4 more phones. Well, the cameras are the same way. You can get 4 times the clarity for an extra 10% more. And so it's like, yeah, you probably should, because even if we can downgrade the quality for storage requirements, because that's a factor. Once you're up and operating, you have cannabis, you have people and your employees, you can't make a 16 gigabyte iPhone a 64 gigabyte. You can sell those, so maybe that's not a good example. But you have to buy a whole new system, new cameras, those types of things to get the clarity. So a small additional investment up front can protect you against operational safety hazards, and then just operational overwatch of the facility. So when people know that you have good quality cameras, good software that's easy to actually check, the chances of you getting robbed from that kind of a safety standpoint is drastically diminished. And the chances of somebody trying to pull off some kind of a stunt once you're up and operating in some of these larger facilities is drastically diminished as well, because they know they have beautiful looking cameras that have the clarity to can prove them wrong, and coverage all over the place. So anyway, it's something that definitely takes some time and look at, whether you can afford to go with the system you want from day one. There's equipment financing companies and those types of things that can help with that like to do things like security that are requirements, and that can offset some of those initial costs. But it's just good to know what's available out there, and even if it isn't something you can afford from day one, you are able to upgrade to it, because correct me if I'm wrong, but people that are up and operating, especially if they're growing and being successful, that's something that they're constantly thinking about, is their safety and security, both keeping the successful business I built, as well as not getting robbed. That's all I gotta say.
Can I ask just, because you've talked about the physical security cameras and guarding against folks coming in, breaking in your door. What about the security issues internally in terms of cash management, that kind of thing, tracking, where it may not be a visible break-in, but you're losing inventory, or there's a loss of cash, which obviously is violating state protocol.
Safety, you gotta protect your wallets too, and that's important. It's a vulnerable risk right now. I had a customer call me up 2 weeks ago and talk about the fact that he had $72,000 worth of product mysteriously disappeared because he just took inventory for the first time in 3 months. Obviously, take inventory more often. But it wasn't some major theft, it had no break-ins, it was voiding sales and pocketing the cash. And he had crappy cameras, and he didn't have good coverage, and it was the most expensive security system he's ever purchased. And so
after he lost $72,000.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Anyway, I won't go down that my sales pitch here, but it's amazing how expensive a really crappy security system can be with that intent. And so it's obviously good to have protocols in place. We recommend customers have kind of designated areas where cash counting is happening. So you have general overview, which is good, but areas right over the register, areas where inventory is taken, inventory where cash counting is done, is you have focused cameras that are right, see a 4 foot by 4 foot square, literally read the denominations on the bills, which is not a really impressive thing to do. It's just a dedicated camera that's doing that. And then it just takes overwatch to make sure that you train people to do it. So you have your general overview cameras that says, hey, you didn't do it on this table, you did it on that table. This is the table you cash count on. I could see that you did it at that table with the overwatch, but I couldn't see what you're doing. Therefore, I'm gonna assume that you're stealing. Oh, you're not? Well, then you should do it at the table that shows me that you're not stealing. Because if you're not stealing, then you should do it at the area where I can see that, so you can prove to me that you're not stealing. And you put just a few little measures like that in place. And again, you need to have a system that's easy to use. I don't know if you guys have used many camera systems, but they're terrible. All of them except for like 5. And so you need something that's easy to use, that people know that you're going to use, and then you need to inspect what you expect. Right? Cheesy saying of the night. And you just need to actually check it. And oftentimes, one of the things that I advise my customers on, it's not just find bad things and yell at people for it. It's talk about good things that you saw them doing on camera. Hey, I really appreciate you organized the bills all in order. The other day, I was looking at the video and I saw that you put all 20s in the same order. Oh, just makes it just, I don't know, I'm OCD like that too. That's fantastic. I really appreciate it. Good job. They're like, instantly, all they're thinking about is, oh, you watched those cameras and you watched me doing my job while I was, while you were not there. Okay, that's cool. Good to know. Thank you for the compliment. I'm going to make sure that I'm not on Facebook next time too. So, I mean, there are simple things that you can put into place that go a long way when it comes to actually protecting yourself from internal theft as well. Go ahead.
I had a question. I mean, I know I told you we've been talking with Matt Paul from the company, and so my question is not really specific to this because he's been great in helping us out a lot.
Sure.
My question is regarding your company, what is, do y'all plan on expanding into different states as well? Because I know Canada Security, I know y'all are already in Washington, or do y'all plan on staying just in the Northwest region?
Yeah, Oregon and Washington are just practice.
Okay.
There's a small country to the south of us, and so we're perfecting the process in Oregon in our backyard. We use subcontractors for every ounce of install. I have 20 employees just on the Canada side, and I have 1 service tech to allow us to expand all over. We're in Southern Oregon. We've done probably 80 projects in the last 3 months in Southern Oregon. I haven't stepped on site at a single one of them because we have our authorized dealers and subcontractors, and so that model, Spokane and Seattle, they're far away. I'm not just shooting a truck up there. And so yes, we're expanding all over the country. We were on one of the applications in Hawaii that won their license, one of the 8. So I'm talking to them tomorrow. So yay for Hawaii. So we're definitely all over the country. So our intent is the highly regulated states, not the merit-based states as much other than Hawaii. That's why. So the merit-based states are not as big of a deal to us right now, but states like Oregon, Washington, and some of these other states that come up in November will be definite targets for us. So as our customers, we believe that people in Oregon will establish their brands, go outside of Oregon. We want to be able to service those customers all over the country. Yeah. He's not an employee of mine. It's not a plan, right? Cool. I'm going to pass off. So feel free to track me down afterwards if you need. If you have any
Thank you, Noah. All right, we're going to turn it up to Farmer Tom. I loaded a bunch of your pictures, but you don't know what order they're in.
Okay, go for it.
So, do you want me to run them and then you'll just start talking?
Fine. Yeah, we can kind of go through them.
Well, let's start with this one.
All right.
Who the heck is Farmer Tom?
Well, Farmer Tom is, I don't know, I'm a small organic farmer out of Vancouver, Washington. Been landscaping since I was 12 years old. Been playing in the dirt, been growing cannabis off and on for the last 25 years. Me and my wife got together and I raided our collective in San Diego in '99 where I got arrested for 448 plants. So we kind of got this big, long history in the cannabis world, and workplace health and safety just kind of fell, into it. It's kind of funny, my grandfather was on the first National Safety Commission. He worked for Convair and Republic Steel at HR, so he handled all the safety stuff. And he used to tell me about safety when I was a kid, and about his vision, how he wished he could be a pioneer. So I guess I'm kind of living vicariously through my grandfather, which is really pretty cool. And what's kind of come up is when after I got arrested, I kind of had to dip out of the cannabis world a little bit, so I didn't go to federal prison for 15 years. So in the intern, I ended up working at Pacifica Candles here in Portland, where I was the director of manufacturing for 2.5 years out of the 8 years that I worked there. I took on all the OSHA stuff, so I'm going to give you guys some heads up on what you guys need to do on a daily basis. You need to have monthly OSHA safety meetings where you get at least the managers of the different departments together, where you sit down and you ask them questions about what they think how they can make their departments more safe, and and then there's a report that's made, and then those things are kept in file. Another thing is the MSDS sheets, the material data safety sheets, are really super important too, and those all need to be invisible in your workplace, so the employees can look at the different materials that they're working with, and then the hazards that are associated with those. They need to be not only, you need to have duplicate copies, one in your OSHA file, and then one on the wall in the building where the other safety material that you're supposed to hang up there, I think as far as unemployment and minimum wage, all those kind of stuff that gets put onto a wall. So the MSDS sheets are really critical. The other thing I would suggest is like, bi-monthly walkthroughs with your whole crew. Walk the whole facility and have them point out what they think could be hazards to their workplace, and then ask them, how do you think we could make it better? Because that gets them involved in the safety portion. It's kind of a boring thing, but it breaks them away from their day-to-day, and it really shows them that you care about their safety and health, which is critical to having a good employee. So there's some things that definitely can be done out there. I mean, you're gonna have to keep these things. Another thing is forklifts. They need to be licensed forklift drivers. So you can go two routes there. You can either have one of your managers to become a forklift instructor, like I did at Pacific. I was a certified forklift instructor, and I educated all the guys in the shop that have forklift licenses. I would do like yearly reviews on them, and then any kind of upgrades they wanted to do in their licensing, I would handle that kind of stuff too. So it's better if it's done internal as opposed to bringing people in. But you definitely have to have the monthly safety meetings on hand. You got to have the MSDS sheets. You got to have those on hand. And you got to have the forklift stuff. Those are three of the things that OSHA in Oregon is really, really mental about. And they're also going to, once they come into your place, they're all going to be looking for extension cords on the ground, air hoses, a bunch of different stuff. So, keep up on your safety. It's really important thing. So that's about my personal experience in telling you what you guys can do in your local businesses here to stay OSHA compliant. We also had the feds at our farm. We did the first HHE in the cannabis industry where we had 4 agents from the CDC come to our farm twice last summer. So originally they came in August, it all started about a year ago in March. Some kid blew himself up in New Mexico, and OSHA called the union, and the union called me, and then I went and I introduced him to JD from Skunk Farm Research, who kind of wrote the Bible on all the hydrocarbons and different extraction processes. And in the meantime, the lady from the union, Belinda, she said, well, the government's got some money. They want to start investigating cannabis work and health safety. Are you interested? And I said, of course. In these early days when opportunities come, whether it's the media or government or whatever, you never turn down these opportunities. You make them happen. So, and that's kind of what I've done over the years. So I invited them on actually a tour. We were going to go through Portland, Sub-Zero, and go to all these grows, and then go to Seattle and Eden Labs and all these places, and I gave them an itinerary, and they said, oh, this is great. And a couple of days later they called and said, no way, we can't have our agents going across state lines and going to all these places that could be perceived as illegal operations. But what we can do is we can make your farm a secure location where federal agents can come and learn and touch and handle cannabis. And the only other place is University of Mississippi and our farm as of right now. But I did hear from the guys from the CDC that they are working with the group from the Mayo Clinic guys that are up in Minnesota. And Minnesota doesn't have any flowers, it's all concentrates up there. So they kind of went from the grassroots, us, to the other end of the spectrum, the total pharmaceutical type of an operation. So I was honored to be able to have the experience to bring them in and educate them at our farm. It was a really great experience. I got to be friends with a lot of these guys. I have their personal phone numbers. The thing I really loved about the federal government, it was so diverse. The group of people they brought in both times were, like it was a beautiful picture of America, you know. The head guy, he must have weighed 4 bills, you know. And then Mary, his little assistant, she was like 68 and skin and bones. And then there was AC from, he was from India, and then Kirtan was from Africa. So it was pretty interesting, the diverse group, you know. And Kirtan's last job before he came to my pot farm was Ebola, where he was like in Africa in a glass booth looking at dead cadavers pretty much for like the last, 8 or 9 months. So these guys are out there.
And then Farmer Tom.
And then Farmer Tom, right? So right here we have pictures of them. They actually hooked us up to a repetitive motion glove where I brought in a bunch of trimmers. So my deal was when they actually, you know, in August we trained them for 2 days, and then actually in October they came for the actual health hazard evaluation. And cannabis is being new, they thought it was prime for a health hazard evaluation to kind of see what goes on. So from the beginning, my vision was to give them as much data as possible. Because the data they started off was from University of Mississippi, and boy, they even hated the University of Mississippi's data. Believe me, these guys were like, they didn't like it. You know, they had to work with it all the time, and they weren't really impressed. So when they came in, they were coming for 3 days. I had to schedule that. So the first day we left 10 plants that we harvested in our greenhouse. Here's some pictures here of us harvesting. I had Como News come by. They called and they wanted to be a part of it, so they came on up. So one day we did all harvesting because I wanted to give them real, actual data on the harvesting process. And so they hooked us up with sniffers. They hooked us up with like a dust collector, and then an endotoxin collector, which is picks up molds and microbes and stuff like that. And
Is that what this is? Can you describe what?
Yeah, the one, the metal ones are the dust collectors. So they go around, but you look at up on my other side over there, there's a little white tag with a hose hanging down. Well, that one is the endotoxin collectors, and we got the reports back on those, and they came back well under some national standards that were created, I guess, over in the Netherlands somewhere. So it was pretty, they had us hooked up for 3 days. So like the first day we did, it was all about we harvested, and the second day was all about shucking, all about taking the buds off the stems. So we did a whole day of shucking. And then the third day we did trimming, where we did machine trimming, hand trimming, and then like I said, they took data. I brought in like 6 or 8 hand trimmers, and we put them on there for about a half hour a piece. And he was able to collect a lot of really good data for repetitive motion. And these are all the things that the federal government's concerned about, you know, getting into the cannabis industry, because it is new.
So Tom, what will they do with this data? They'll make recommendations, or?
Well, what happens generally is OSHA is enforcement, and NIOSH is they write all the laws, and they do all the reports that OSHA makes the laws off of. So what will happen here is they're going to do my report, which is going to be published this summer, and they'll take that data, and then they're going to go to the university, these guys over at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. They'll collect that data, and they'll start to get like an index of good data to work with. You know, they really have to start off somewhere, and my whole deal was to give them a good base point to jump off on. So yeah, it's been an honor and a pleasure to be able to do it. I kind of pinch myself all the time, but it's great, and I'm kind of taking the bull by the horns, and we're kind of running with this thing. So I've been a part of the Washington State Cannabis Commission Formation Committee. I work with the union on workplace health and safety manuals. I work with a group out of Arizona called Focus. They're another standards organization. So I'm kind of out there, you know, embracing this world of workplace health and safety. I think it was a really good first step for the federal government as the way for them to get involved. It was really a safe stepping stone for them to jump off to. If you're looking for workplace health and safety, I mean, these are businesses that are going on there. A lot of these have been running for years, and they kind of want to jump ahead of it. The whole thing with NIOSH is they really wanted to, they're the world's largest health and safety organization, and they really wanted to show it that they could go into a new industry, create, get a baseline for what's going on, and really start reports and creating standards for the industry. And really standards is what it comes all about now. I mean, I'm always super pushing for always take the high road. And what I mean with that is when you're buying components, especially these vape pen, these plastic cartridges are really bad for people. You know, when you're buying products, always take the high road, because the best and the most quality products are the ones that are going to survive. The lower quality products are going to do nothing but put a bad stain on the industry. So always take the high road. You know, whether it's buying components for your business or cutting any kind of safety standards. So, you know, my thing is just take the high road.
Before we pass on, one last question is this a one-off thing? Are they going to come back? And are they looking for, is there opportunity for other folks to participate in this kind of
I'm
initiative?
not, my other guests here are more familiar with NIOSH and their kind of history.
So right.
I don't know, but the University of Washington.
But you've spoken to them subsequently.
Oh yeah, I talk to them. Yeah, I talk to them at least once a month. They keep me up.
So we didn't scare them away or anything.
No, we didn't scare them away. They really like it, me and Paula. So they've actually become friends with us. So it's kind of nice. You know, they're just regular people out there doing their jobs.
Yeah, we got a friend in the feds.
Yeah, no doubt.
In your experience working with OSHA, what would you say one of the largest compliance issues you've seen when dealing with greenhouse operations?
Oh, compliance with greenhouse operations? Well, they're actually in the greenhouse world. It's mainly it's like hoses and stuff like that. Slippery surfaces, hoses, that kind of stuff that you're really looking at in the greenhouse world. And and cords and stuff like that. They're really, OSHA really freaks out on cords laying out, cords that aren't covered, air compressor hoses, those blower things. They really have a heart attack about those. They need to have like a emergency, like a back valve on it, so when you put your hand on it, it won't rip through your skin. So that's a big concern of theirs. They hit us up for that a couple of times when I was over here in Northwest Industrial working.
What
So.
about trimmers and scissors, and do they require gloves or?
No, but when we had them at our farm, when we did trimming, all of our trimmers, we like them the hand that they're holding the bud with, we like them to have a glove on it, because the scissor and the glove can be a little bit baggy, because the scissor will grab the glove before it grabs your skin.
Yeah.
You know, so we always like them to, not necessarily on the hand they're trimming with the scissors, but the other hand we like them to have a rubber glove on there, because it will grab the glove before it will grab your skin and catch it. So there's certain things that we taught them. I'm also a big freak about nitrogen sealing. I mean, it drives me crazy. These people are putting these 13 to 15% nugs in these sealed packages and then throwing them on the shelves, and they sit in a bin for who knows how long. And within 30 days, at a 15% nug, you're starting to grow some sort of molds and stuff like that also. So another thing, and it's going to come down the road, and I really pushed it hard when we were dealing with the guys from NIOSH, is the need for nitrogen sealing. I mean, it's really a must if we really want to keep, if everything's going to be packaged in a sealed container, then we have to go to nitrogen sealing, because with nitrogen sealing, it lasts 6 months guaranteed, like shelf life, and up to 2 years. From that year to second year in nitrogen sealing, it's kind of like wine. An old bottle of wine, when you pop it open and it starts to oxidize really quickly, the same thing will happen to your cannabis. Instead of seconds, it may take a couple of days. But it's the best way to go, and you really be able to keep customers that way. I think it's a great selling point, and eventually it's going to be mandatory.
Thank you. Sally, let's keep
Sally.
going down the...
So.
And I'm gonna give you this because you.
Okay, yeah, I came equipped with an actual PowerPoint presentation. So I am a safety professional. I've been working in Portland for nearly 30 years. I started my career in environmental back in the 80s when environmental laws were new, and kind of my place where I fit the best is industries that are brand new, that really the standards don't fit in the industry. So what better than cannabis? So I worked for, if you're in Portland, I worked for Metro for when they first opened their household hazardous waste disposal, and I was kind of at the forefront of figuring out how to handle all these chemicals that came out of people's barns and garages and get those disposed of properly. And then I moved on and I was safety manager at PDX Airport for a few years, worked with an industrial hygiene consultant doing the kind of work that they did at Tom's Farm, where you're putting the equipment on people, measuring the exposures. And when the economy turned down, I ended up as safety manager at Leatherman Tool. And at Leatherman, I learned an awful lot about how not to get cut while you're doing manual handling, because it's a knife factory here in Portland. And about a year ago, I left Leatherman and opened my own company called Indie Safety. And I do a variety of program management, consulting, and training. And I'm also in people's houses, testing for mold, asbestos, lead, all that other kind of stuff. So what I thought that I would do today is give you guys as potential business owners in Oregon sort of an overview of how OSHA works and how safety works, and how the fact that there's OSHA out there doesn't mean that you're actually doing good safety. And it's the same that these two said, that compliance, if you're complying with OSHA, you're complying with the law, you're probably getting a C or maybe a D. And there's a lot better you can do. So we'll just flip through my show. I've got about 20 slides and it's a little boring. So one of my goals is to prove to you that safety is not the most boring industry of all. Because I know it's pretty bad. So that's me, and we don't have to look at it. That's sort of my background. The reason that I connected with the MJBA, other than joining as a member, was there's this great grant opportunity out of Washington Department of L&I, and so I contacted Dave and said, hey, partner with me and let's get some money from L&I and let's do some more safety studies and set up some best practices for Washington. So we're waiting to hear about that. We've got a couple more weeks to wait, but that's kind of how I get here, and that's what he was talking about, me pushing on him. So now we are partners and hoping that this is gonna happen.
More safety meetings at the MJBA.
More safety meetings, conference room 13. So, safety for the cannabis business owners. So, gosh, I can't really see this from here. So what I wanted to talk about a little bit is how OSHA actually works. Some of the rules and regulations that you need to know about, how OSHA is not the same as good safety. This one, why safety has a good return on investment, because most of us are sort of bred throughout our careers to fear OSHA and hate safety. And there's a totally different way to look at it. I mean, if you do good safety, you will save a ton of money and you might make money in the process. So we'll talk a little bit about the grant and this program. Right now we're calling it 5-Star Safety. The name might change, but it's an approach that's totally innovative to managing safety in your company that is a lot easier than trying to figure out what OSHA's trying to tell you to do, because OSHA's totally confusing. And my last slide is there's a ton of free resources online, so I put up a couple of web pages. There's a ton of information out there. It's just putting it together in a way that makes sense, that's complicated. So my first slide is, this is how we all feel about safety. It's horrifying. It's this rules and this fear and the safety police. And the blue gorilla with the stamp, these are characters that an artist made for me to basically market and sell the safety program at Leatherman. And something happened with these superhero characters that people dug them and they loved them. And their opportunity to be a superhero and have a character made them be really into safety. And for some reason, the program just absolutely took off. So, OSHA, right? So the way that OSHA works is there's a federal law, it's a federal standard. OSHA has their enforcement branch, NIOSH is the research arm. The NIOSH people go around and do studies and they advise OSHA on what rules to make. OSHA doesn't necessarily make those rules because there's all these lobbyists that lobby for the rules to be less than NIOSH is recommending. So step one is go to NIOSH because they have better information than OSHA does. OSHA is minimum compliance. One thing to be aware of is that OSHA doesn't care what you do at home, off the job. They're not about safe driving. They're not about The effects of cannabis for people, OSHA cares about occupational safety, safety for workers in the workplace. So then it's set up that each state could decide whether they wanted to have their own OSHA program or not. So if you don't have an OSHA program, then you have to comply with the federal law. But if you do have a state OSHA program, which Oregon does, Washington does, and California does, then you have to comply with your state's OSHA program. So in Oregon, we have OSHA. In Washington, they have the Department of Labor and Industries, which has the Department of Occupational Safety, and then they have WISHA, which is their safety rules. And so people throw around all of these acronyms, and depending on where you are and where you live, that's what determines what you have to comply with. I think I'll talk about it just a little bit later. So OSHA's structure, as Tom mentioned, every OSHA has to have two branches. They have enforcement and they have consultation. And those two branches are supposedly not supposed to talk to each other. So it's a safe thing to do to call OSHA and say, would you come to my business and take a look and help me figure out how to do better safety, because the consultants love doing safety and they're not allowed to talk to enforcement. So the picture you're seeing up there is the last job that I had. The safety manager before me called OSHA and asked them to come in for a consultation. This was a cardboard that was taken off of a giant whiteboard. And this was all of the violations that OSHA found in the factory. And then that guy quit, and then they hired me. And so I ended up with this giant list of violations, and that's a pretty easy place to start. If you don't know where to start with safety, OSHA will tell you where to start. The only problem with that is if you do invite them in for consultation, one, it takes a long time. There's a long waiting list. And the second side of it is you have to fix what they find within a certain time frame, or they'll come back and then you'll get a fine. So once you invite them in, you're agreeing to fix the problem. On the other hand of it, the consultants are really competent safety people. They love doing safety, they love helping. They have a ton of free training resources online. They have training resources in other languages. There's a whole program called PESO, particularly for agriculture, that's all in Spanish. So you can go on there and get the training you need without having necessarily to be an expert or pay an expert. Let's see what the bottom bullet says. Yeah, free training and free resources available online. So OSHA enforcement. So I put this graphic on there because it just killed me. It says, police officers are your friends. They're here to help you. I saw that. I just couldn't stop it. So OSHA enforcement. When would you get inspected? What is the fear of OSHA? OSHA comes around to inspect for a number of specific reasons. It's not necessarily random. The first is if you're in an industry that's called a National Emphasis Program, and so something like Leatherman Tool was in an industry that had a high level of amputations. They get on a short list of people to be inspected. There's also right now programs for combustible dust because a bunch of people have blown up their sugar factories. So if you create a bunch of combustible dust, then you're gonna be on a short list for inspections. And this year it's isocyanates, which is a particularly hazardous chemical. So if you're dealing with that chemical, you'd be on a short list. Another reason that they would come by is if your company or you are in an overall industry that has a very high injury rate. And what that really means is that I can be running a great cannabis operation, but Tom can be having a bunch of injuries at his, and OSHA looks at the industry as a whole to decide who to target. And workers' comp does the same thing. So the fact is we really are all in it together to have good safety, because that will reduce everybody's costs. Another reason that they might show up is there is a random list of all businesses in Oregon or in Washington, and your name might come up. So they might just show up. Let's see. If you have a very serious injury or fatality at your factory, they will investigate. And the last is if a complaint is made about you, whether it's somebody driving by and doesn't like what they see, if OSHA's driving by your work site and they see you, if you have an employee that's pissed off at you and wants to get back at you and they call OSHA, those all trigger OSHA inspections. So there's a number of reasons why they might come. My advice is if they do come, let them in. You'll just cause way more trouble by sending them away, because what they'll have to do is go get a search warrant and then they'll come in anyway. So let them in, be friendly, show them your stuff. cooperate with them and they'll be nice to you. So at the bottom here, what I really have at the bottom of these slides is the truth about OSHA inspections. The fact is injuries are a lot more expensive than OSHA fines. OSHA doesn't really have a lot of teeth. They might fine you, it might be $300 or $500 or even $1,000, but that is nothing compared to the cost of a back injury or even a finger injury. So preventing injuries is, in my opinion, way more important than preventing the fines. And I probably will say this now and over, is that bad safety equals bad press, and bad press is bad for business. Good safety doesn't get noticed. If you're doing good safety, nobody cares. The minute your safety fails, you're all over the news, and that is the last thing you want to be. So the rules are structured, and this is really frustrating. First off, at the top of the rules, it says every employer in the United States must provide a workplace that's free of hazards. But then they kind of tell you what that means or not. If you're in Oregon, you have to go to Oregon OSHA to find out what laws to comply with, and they divide up their laws by divisions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in Oregon, they have rules for all workplaces, then they have rules for most workplaces called general industry, then different rules for construction and different rules for agriculture. So depending on what part of the cannabis industry you're in determines what rules you're gonna follow. Washington is a little bit different. Washington has core rules for all industries, and then it's more hazard based. So if you have this hazard, then you must comply with this rule. So Washington's a little bit different, but if you're doing business in Washington, look at their webpage. If you're doing business in Oregon, look at Oregon's webpage. So workers' comp versus safety. At the bottom it says, the job of safety and safety professionals like me is to prevent having accidents to begin with, right? We don't want to have injuries, we don't want them to happen. The job of workers' comp is to pay for accidents that do happen. So every company is required to carry workers' comp insurance. If you live in Washington, you buy your insurance through the Department of Labor and Industries. They are the insurance carrier. If you live in Oregon, you go out and you basically shop it on the open market. But the biggest salesperson in Oregon is Safe Corporation. They're sort of quasi-governmental organization. They're loaded. They have a ton of money and they totally dominate. So you will probably end up being insured by Safe. And the cool thing about Safe is they're not OSHA. They don't enforce. They're there to help you reduce claims because they don't want to pay for your injuries. So they've got a ton of consultants that will come out and help you figure stuff out. Let's see. It's weird from this position to not be able to see the slides. I wanted to mention, because these guys mentioned too, when people talk about risk management and loss control, just so you know the lingo, loss control has a couple of different meanings in the safety industry. One, loss control often means security, right? It's just when they say I'm a loss control guy, you're a security guy, or you're a shoplifting police or something like that. Loss control in the insurance industry means preventing claims from happening, and loss control in the safety industry means you're the safety professional preventing injuries. And so if someone says I'm loss control, you gotta find out like what industry they're in to even understand what the heck they're talking about. So workers' comp, again, in Oregon, you gotta shop it, but you're gonna buy it from Safe. In Washington, you're required to buy it from Labor and Industries, which goes back to this grant. The reason that Washington has a grant opportunity and Oregon doesn't is because Washington has the workers' comp along with the OSHA, and so they're more motivated to prevent industries from a governmental standpoint, where Oregon doesn't have that same structure, so they don't have the same motivation. So typical requirements, it's basically a mess. It's pretty hard to follow, but some of the things that Tom mentioned, in Oregon, you have to have written policies for each different topic. Like you have to have an emergency plan and a fire plan and a lockout tagout plan and a respirator plan. So you have to know which plans you need. Washington just says you must have an accident prevention plan. So it's a different way to approach that. Across the board, from federal OSHA down, there's specific record keeping and reporting requirements if you have accidents, if you have injuries. There's annual reporting that you have to do. There's employee training requirements, there's safety committee, safety meeting requirements, because by law, they actually said, we want people to be involved in safety. It's better safety if your workers are involved. People like to be involved in what they're doing. Nobody likes to have things done to them, and safety is one of those things that companies like to do to their employees. It's much, much better if the employees figure out for themselves what is gonna work for them. So at the bottom there, I have this example that just blows my mind. So you have 3 people on your property. They're all on ladders. One of them is working on a brand new building. You're building a barn. They're doing construction. Another one is working on an older building and they're painting it. They're doing general industry building maintenance. And the third one is pruning a tree. Those 3 people, 8 feet up on that ladder, are subject to 3 different regulations. And how high they can be on that ladder without fall protection varies based on what they're doing and why they're doing it. And it's just ridiculously stupid. So the real thing is, how high up can you be on a ladder? If you fall off, you're not gonna get hurt. That's the level that you want to protect at. But it just kills me. There's rules that vary from 4 feet to 6 feet to 10 feet, to you can put 3 extension ladders together up to 72 feet and not have fall protection. I mean, it's crazy. So what I mentioned is that, you know, the thing is, OSHA, if you're complying with everything they want you to comply with, and if they come in, you'll probably get some little violation somewhere or another, because that's their job. But if you are really just trying to do safety to comply with OSHA, you're not doing very good safety. You might be getting a meets standards or does not meet standards, but you're not getting a exceptional. Or, so what I really want to say is that you really do, as a business owner, you have to take it to heart and go above and beyond what the requirements say. It's really difficult to understand what the requirements say, but it's really easy to understand that it's really expensive when people get hurt. And the goal is prevent people from getting hurt, and then this other stuff doesn't come into play. So here we go. This is a little chart out of the University of Washington. How much it costs when somebody gets hurt, and it is really hard to see. But injuries, typically there's direct costs, that's how much does it cost to have the surgery, and indirect costs, how much did you pay for the hassle of having the injury, with investigating with your lawyers, with fixing the problem, with losing production, with hiring a new guy, all of that stuff. And they estimate that the indirect costs are 120% of how much the injury costs. So say a person strains their finger, they go to the emergency room because their finger hurts and they don't have good health insurance. So first they're paying like $5,000 because they went to the emergency room. They've got a little finger strain, they have to go to physical therapy, maybe they're on light duty for a couple of weeks. That injury, the direct cost itself, is about $8,000 to $10,000. And then your hassle, the cost of your hassle is another $10,000 to $12,000. So suddenly one stupid little finger strain just costs you $20,000. When we get into severe injuries like a rotator cuff or a carpal tunnel or a back injury, we're into $80,000 to $120,000 in injury, and that's when Dave said it can take your company down. A single bad injury or a single employee that has a bunch of repeated little injuries is a problem. You gotta find those people before they have, you know, multiple repeated expensive injuries, and either fix their behavior or get them out of your company.
And these costs don't include any possible legal ramifications.
No, this is not legal. This is medical and administrative hassle that you have to go through if there's an injury, basically. So this, I'm not gonna read this slide too. I put this up here to say the best webpage that I've found so far is Washington OSHA, LNI's OSHA. They actually have it divided into producers, growers, processors, and retailers. And if you go on their webpage, you can find a whole list of laws and rules and topics that are relevant to the portion of the industry that you're gonna be in. So that is a fantastic place to start, is LNI's webpage. OSHA in Oregon OSHA, I called them a year ago to ask them how they were gonna regulate, and they wouldn't even talk. they were afraid to talk about it. So totally different culture. If you're looking for good information, I think right now you still have to go to Washington.
Yeah, the L&I guys actually made a brochure for us and came out to the MJBA and are really proactively going out to talk to cannabis companies about establishing best protocols. So here in Oregon, we're not seeing that same kind of proactivity.
OSHA wouldn't even talk to me, and I said, what are you gonna do with your safety regulations? Because cannabis has the same hazards as everyone else. You have electricity, you have forklifts, you have fire extinguishers, you have chemicals, you have all those things. And Health and Human Services handling that.
Right.
So they just were afraid. I have not really seen any change since then. So we'll see. It's kind of our job to pull them along, I think, as the industry. So this is straight off of Washington's webpage, and you can go there and find the words on this slide. The real hazards that are out there are little things like the little strain that ends up turning into a bigger injury when someone says, oh, my wrist hurts or my elbow hurts. Early intervention, early medical management, different kinds of ergonomic gear is much better than making them continue to work. Another one is hearing loss. At least in Oregon, the last person they worked for, when their hearing was measured and they had a loss of hearing, even if they're 65 years old and it's natural, that company pays for it. So a hearing loss claim is about $50,000 because you buy their disability for life, you buy their hearing aids for life, and you compensate them for their loss of livelihood. So hearing loss is surprisingly extremely important in safety, because the only way to prevent it is to wear earplugs. So by far, the very most expensive, routinely expensive injuries I've ever seen as a safety manager are people just falling down. It's not like you'd think a back injury or something, but people just wiping out, slip, trips, and falls, fracture your hip, blow out your knee. Unfortunately, I saw a guy become paraplegic from a fall from 4 feet, and a couple of $100,000 for that employer. So I would say if you're looking out for one hazard in particular, it's have people not fall down. You know, it's not the fall, it's the sudden stop at the end. That's the big problem. Other real hazards, you know, it's anybody that's had an injury, when you talk to them, they say, oh, I knew I shouldn't have done that. Well, if you knew you shouldn't have done it, change your habits and don't do it. Figure out how to think about it to not do it. Because we all can go back and go, oh God, I knew I shouldn't have done that, that was stupid. Typically poor communication, bad morale, stress, rushing, freaking out, you know, people having their OCD attacks. All that stuff that creates workplace stress causes people to get hurt. I mean, it just does. And